I'm sure everyone has noticed that between some of our sessions, a young man has come up here to make sure that the IT is working properly. I think we should all give a round of applause to Simcha Wolf for the terrific job he has done, and everything has worked. The lights are working, the mics are working, the internet is working, and I was remiss because yesterday was his birthday, so we're wishing you an early happy birthday for next year. Aleph helps people from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, ethnicities, and faiths, since we believe that every person is created in God's image. To accomplish this monumental task, Aleph employs 80 staff throughout several offices around the country and is blessed to have over 500 volunteers. At the helm of this massive effort is a very wise and dedicated rabbi who serves as Aleph's executive director, Rabbi Aaron Lipskar. Rabbi Lipskar and the Aleph team are spearheading ambitious projects in the area of alternative sentencing by addressing policy on a broad level, working on national criminal justice reform measures, advocating for appropriate legislation, and holding conversations with judges and prosecutors to discuss large-scale justice reform through the use of alternative sentences. I personally have been engaged in a lot of those conversations, and I must tell you, it is inspiring and refreshing to hear the people who have the power to make the decisions open to these concepts. The word is beginning to get out. Aleph works with judges, prosecutors, and probation departments on individual cases, advocating in appropriate cases, only those where there is no danger to society, for alternatives to incarceration. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi Aaron Lipskar.
Good morning. I'd like to begin by thanking God for this historic and monumental convening, and I pray that we can continue to work together to effectuate a very real, meaningful, as I'm sure you all agree, and as we've been discussing over the last day and a half, a much needed paradigm shift in our criminal justice system. I'm going to take a few minutes just to recognize the many people, there we go, that helped make this summit a reality. And although it may take a few minutes, I hope you'll bear with me, as we all know that saying thank you is very important. And if I miss out anybody, you'll please forgive me. I would like to salute our esteemed chair and Honorable Judge Donald for her breathtaking dedication and insight, and her commitment to this vital cause. And in case she hasn't done enough yet, the judge committed last night to do even more and double her efforts. So ladies and gentlemen, hold on tight. I want to take just a brief moment to recognize and thank, of course, our organization's leadership. Beyond the conversations that we're having here about criminal justice reform, Aleph, of course, through its primary mandate, works with thousands of individuals in hundreds of institutions every single day to bring educational programs, religious programs, advocacy, and so much more, in addition to the tremendous support that is provided for their families and for their loved ones. So just for a moment, I want to recognize, of course, the leadership of our organization and those that tirelessly work day and night to see these programs through. Of course, our dear founder, Rabbi Shalom Lipskar. With us, of course, our very dear Rabbi Tzvi Boyarsky, our Director of Advocacy. Rabbi Menachem Katz and Rabbi Shua Brook, who help oversee the important implementation of these critical programs. Thank you and kol hakavod to the event's producer, the legendary Hannah Dershowitz, whose resolve and determination and many, many all-nighters was key to making this entire event possible. Her vision, her hard work over the past 18 months brought together a wealth of incredible speakers and panelists, some of which we've heard from, many of which we'll hear from today. Aleph is truly blessed to have Hannah leading our policy work. Thank you to Gary, our MC, and for that very kind introduction. But more importantly, thank you for the historic work on so many levels, working many nights and using your God-given talents to make a difference in so many lives. And of course, thank you for securing the participation of this esteemed Columbia Law School for the summit. And thank you to Pepper Hamilton for providing the CLE accreditations. I'd like to thank the event's associate coordinator. Where's Chaya? Is Chaya here? Chaya Lerner. Chaya, who is a force of nature, took on this project readily and without hesitation. But I think that if she had known how much work was ahead, she might have just taken an extra minute to think about it. But while balancing many other responsibilities within the organization, she has worked around the clock at all hours and brilliantly juggled all these different moving parts to coordinate all these different aspects of the event. So thank you very much, Chaya. Of course, every one of these conferences and summits require many moving parts and logistical pieces that need to come together. So I'd like to thank our event planner, the unflappable Laura Albers, who put every resource into making sure this event would be a success and made sure that every detail was in place, and even the pieces that we weren't even aware of, that she helped us make sure this would be a success. Of course, to Columbia Law, thank you many times over for the privilege of hosting the summit on your esteemed campus and for your partnership throughout this event. It is apropos that such an important summit take place on a campus that has been so foundational and the formation and development of the nation's leaders in law and justice. And of course, thank you to the staff doing such a fantastic job. I'm going to, for a moment, echo Gary's sentiments to this handsome young man in the green sweatshirt, Simcha Wolf. Our director of IT has been keeping everything moving, and also wish him a belated happy birthday. As you heard Gary mentioned, there are hundreds of volunteers that we engage every day in Aleph's work, and I want to recognize our very talented and capable, engaging volunteer coordinator, Sarah Schmuckler. She's here somewhere. For making sure that our volunteer programs and those contributions of time can be used in the most effective and efficient way. I also have to mention Shoshana Liantz before I get told that I'm running out of time, even though we have a couple extra minutes for thank yous, who helped produce the video that you'll see a little bit later today, and for her wonderful dedication to Aleph. As Gary mentioned, there are many dedicated staff that work for Aleph every day, and to stand here and mention every one of them by name would take too much time. So I do just want to mention those that were instrumental and key in helping put together the summit and all of its different details. Of course, thank you to Rivka Tamir. And we want to thank Rabbi Brisky, who some of you heard from yesterday on the panel, Chavi Russ, who's here, who works tirelessly coordinating Aleph's alternative sentencing work. Chaya Block, for working so hard to engage the partners. Yirmi Kirkis. And then we have our technical team who helps put all of this together, Jonathan Hertzberg and David Leibowitz, who work behind the scenes to make sure. And as I mentioned, to all of our staff in our different offices around the country who work tirelessly every day, we thank you very much for your dedication. In her absence, and against her objection, I would also like to mention our West Coast Director of Operations, Rachel Van Etten, who is back in California but managing much of this from there, and our East Coast Director of Operations, Moshe Baruch, who are the glue that help keep everything that is moving all over the country together. We want to give a special mention to Judge Friedman from Maryland, who is here with us today, who has truly been a trailblazer for innovative programs in criminal justice arena, and God willing has committed to us that at our next summit, which will have elements that focus on state judiciary. She will join us as a speaker, God willing. And along with her dear husband, Howard, they were pillars who helped see the elements of the First Step Act through their many friends in public office and networking to help make it a reality. We want to express a deep thanks to Shify Lichtenstein, who's also here with us today. She tends to so many families that are going through so much, and she brings them immense comfort for so many that are in need. We're going to just mention some of our partners that we have here with us so we can save the applause to the end so we can move forward with the program. So we want to, of course, thank Dan Loeb and Jeff Cook and Dan Sterling and the entire team at Third Point who have been such staunch supporters of Aleph's work and are truly moving mountains in criminal justice arena. A warm thanks to our partners and funders, the Coalition for Public Safety and the Pew Charitable Trust. We're also very fortunate that Mr. Francis Greenberger, along with Rogers, the dynamic leader of the Greenberger Center, have agreed to join us for the summit. Mr. Greenberger has transformed the hardship he and his family have experienced with his son's incarceration into a powerful movement to help reform the justice system with a focus on mental health and a remarkable, innovative concept which we'll hear about in the breakout session later this morning, God willing. And to each of you who has joined us today, thank you for taking the time out to participate, to further the conversation around sentencing and justice reform. You are the ones on the ground grappling with these issues every single day, forging the way ahead for this country, and without you, there could be no conversation around these issues and no hope for change. So thank you, and thank you. And now, after all those thank yous, and thank you for your patience, allow me to move us along with the next part of our program. The next two speakers will discuss their experience working with Aleph and the impact Aleph has on criminal justice. First, we will hear from our very dear friend, Benjamin Brafman, whose brilliance is only exceeded by his incredible compassion for so many. Ben is one of the most prominent and effective attorneys in America today, and yet, no matter how busy he is, he's always made himself available to answer Aleph's call at a moment's notice. He's there to help for any person or any time that Aleph needs help on behalf of any individual. And he truly does this with his heart and soul. Ben is truly part of the Aleph family. Thank you, Ben. God bless you. Next, we will hear from a truly inspiring woman, Joy Fishman, who is a harm reduction advocate with Drug Policy Alliance and a board member at the Aleph Institute. Joy truly lives up to her name, bring joy to people in the darkest of hours. In honor of her beloved son of blessed memory, Joy started the Aleph Institute's Jonathan Stampler Summer Scholarship Fund for children who have a parent that is incarcerated, helping ensure they don't miss out on their childhood. Hundreds of children's lives have been changed because of Joy, and they enjoy time in a non-judgmental and fun environment. As we'll hear soon, Joy's late husband, Dr. Fishman, invented the well-known drug Narcan, the opioid overdose reversal drug that has saved countless lives and can be found in emergency rooms around the country. And she is a driving force of the entire Aleph family. After we hear from her, I'd like to share with you a short video about Aleph with remarks from the world-famous Jewish leader, the Lubavitcher Rabbi Menachem Schneerson of blessed memory. The Aleph Institute, as you heard, was born out of the Rebbe's vision and divine insight through his unconditional love for all of humanity. Mr. Ben Brafman.
Thank you, Rabbi Lipskar, and thank you all. If I say something that you agree with, hold your applause until the end, and then if you want to, you can give me a lot of applause. because time is short, and I'm trying to stick to their schedule, which we're now running late on. But, it's interesting to be introduced here as one of the most prominent, successful criminal defense lawyers in America when 45 years ago, Columbia University told me I wasn't smart enough to come here. So it's a round world, and I'm honored to be here, even if it's just for a couple of minutes. And I appreciate the introduction. So let me tell you what my topic is. My topic is two parts. It's sentencing advocacy and Aleph. And they're parts that really go together. Because in more than 45 years of practice, almost 5 as a prosecutor and more than 40 as a criminal defense lawyer, I have found that there is no real better partner today when you want to do creative sentencing advocacy than Aleph. And, people ask me, why am I here today? I'm here for 2 reasons. One, you really can't say no to Tzvi Boyarsky once he gets on your case, so I've never said no to him yet, so I'm here. And I got judges all over the city today trying to figure out who is Boyarsky, who has preempted Brafman for the morning. So I'm here because I'm a big fan of Aleph, I'm a big supporter of Aleph, as all of you interested in the criminal justice system should be. But I'm also here because I don't believe that criminal defense lawyers, prosecutors, probation officers, sentencing advocates really do this work as passionately as they must. Many criminal defense lawyers, when a case is over, either after a plea or a conviction, they assume that the Department of Probation will do a report. They go through the formality of a brief sentencing memo, and they fail to give the judge the kind of information that might change a sentence from incarceration to home confinement or from substantial incarceration to modest incarceration. And I think one of the things I want to do today is talk about sentencing advocacy. I'll do that briefly and then tie it in to where Aleph comes into this adventure. I started in the criminal justice system in the federal courts before the sentencing guidelines, period. There were no guidelines. Judges did what they felt was right. Men and women who were judges, who took their work seriously, had the ability, except in cases where there were mandatory sentences, to do what they thought was right. Give someone a long sentence if they found them to be incorrigible or a repeat offender or a danger to the community, or construct a creative alternative to incarceration. And I have many judges. I've lived long enough so that I have judges who are friends. And they say to me, if you want me not to send someone to prison, give me something else that makes sense, that's real, that's effective, and that has some creative components so that I know what I'm doing, so that I can help craft a sentence that fits the person, not just the crime. And I became a real sentencing advocate. And then, lo and behold, Congress, in its infinite wisdom, created the sentencing guidelines, and they were mandatory. And federal judges throughout the country felt handcuffed. I've had at least a dozen sentences in federal court between 1987 and before the Booker decision, where the guidelines were mandatory, and the judges began their sentences by saying, I wish I did not have to impose such a significant period of incarceration. And it drove me crazy because they took away what I do best, my advocacy. And unless you could pigeonhole someone into an exception under the guidelines that was statutory, and you had categories that were essentially effective for a downward departure, besides a cooperator, besides 5K1. The ultimate irony in the stupidity of how the guidelines were drafted is if you represented someone who was clean and never in trouble before and didn't hang out with criminals, they had nobody to cooperate against. And they couldn't get a 5K letter. And they ended up with a 5 or a 10 or a 15-year sentence. And then you'd come into court with an utterly redeeming, utterly worthless human being with few, if any, redeeming qualities, which happens as a criminal defense lawyer. And you'd sit there and you'd watch that they have a wealth of information to provide, and they would end up with time served or no jail because they were a cooperator. And it just was a perversion of how the criminal justice system should work, where the individual is supposed to prevail. And I and others like me in New York and elsewhere, we became so creative in trying to find ways to get into a downward departure arena. I'll give you just one brief example. I represented a man who was a bad doctor, who just did terrible stuff, cheated and stole and exposed patients. He was a war hero in Vietnam. He came within a hair of winning a Medal of Honor. He saved an entire helicopter that crashed. He was the medic under fire. He helped a dozen people, and they're all alive. And I brought one of the people he saved to court at sentencing, who has 5 children, and who is a vice president now in a communications center. And we wrote a sentencing memo, and I argued that on the 5H1.1, even though military service is not ordinarily a basis for a downward departure, this was extraordinary military service. And the judge gave him, instead of a 57-month sentence, a 6-month sentence, which, of course, the client looked at me and said, "Why should I serve 6 months?" The point I am trying to make is that we have to be very creative. And every once in a while, you hit a home run. But more often than not, you walked out of there and you said, "I'm not really a lawyer. I'm a numbers cruncher." And you're not really a judge. You're a numbers cruncher. And then the Supreme Court of the United States, in its infinite wisdom, declared that the guidelines were no longer mandatory. And indeed, then declared that they were no longer presumptively reasonable. And that the sentence to be imposed on the 3553, which is Aleph's home base, is the personal characteristics of the individual who's about to be sentenced, what you can say about them that's true and honest and good and may resonate or grab the judge's attention. And more often than not, if you really are a passionate sentencing advocate and you realize that after a plea, perhaps your work just starts, you can do magic. Today, although in many states, the judges still impose a within guideline range, but they don't have to. And that's the point I am making. We practice in New York. I practice primarily here and in the southern and eastern districts of New York. The downward variances from the guidelines are substantial. They are regularly imposed by most of the good judges in this district, and people who are facing 15 and 20 years for a financial crime where the guidelines just jack up the sentence to the point of absurdity. In New York today, if you shot a cop and the cop died, you could effectively have the same sentence as someone who is involved in a massive securities fraud, even though they were 60 years old and had no criminal record. They are exposed at times because of the money to a life sentence. Now, the judges, many of them, have backed off and understood that the fraud guidelines are just inappropriate in how they double count and how they make some of these sentences obscene. But that's why I want to now move to what Aleph does. People who don't come to a seminar like this or don't listen to a person like me when I speak about Aleph and don't read about Aleph, who don't even know about Aleph, don't know the most important part about Aleph, besides the sentencing. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. This is alternative sentencing. Aleph's been a pioneer. Aleph has gotten judges in my district, brilliant judges with great reputations. Jack Weinstein in the Eastern District of New York, perhaps one of the finest judges ever to hold office. He is in his 90s, and he talks about Aleph as if they are a godsend. Valerie Caproni in the Southern District, who is not a defense favorite judge. She's a tough lady who came out of the Justice Department. She has commented on Aleph. John Gleason, who's no longer a judge, he believes that Aleph plays a vital role. So let me just tell you something about the work Aleph does. And let me tell you something for the people who've never been there. The scariest, loneliest place in the world is inside a federal prison. You have never felt so alone, so vulnerable, and so sad than sitting across the table from someone who's not coming home. And you're leaving, and they're not. And they may not be leaving for 5 or 10 years. And when Aleph comes in there and says to them, we can help you just with normal stuff. Maybe we can't get you out, but maybe we can help your family. Because most federal prisoners who go to jail go penniless. Because the United States, God bless America, they take all of the money, or they lien all of the money. So many of the people who go to jail have no money. And then they turn around and they have 3 children. And the summer comes. Aleph sent 96 children of incarcerated individuals to summer camp last year. Who else does that? Nobody else does that. I saw someone who represents the city of New York on the panel. I'm sure she does a great job. They don't give a damn about the kids of people who are incarcerated. One of the things you learn as a criminal defense lawyer is that we don't really have a constituency. No one has ever run for office and been successful on being soft on crime. No one has ever run for office and been successful in politics, especially today, by suggesting that we should be compassionate when we deal with people who are incarcerated, of every color, of every religious background, of every economic background. These people face problems that are beyond the case. And if you're a good criminal defense lawyer, you know it, because to be a passionate advocate, you got to understand who you're representing. You got to meet with their family. You got to meet with their kids. And you got to recognize that their kids are never going to be the same. Once a kid walks out of a prison visiting room visiting a parent, they remember that forever. It's an unfriendly place. And however they want to paint the colors and bring toys, their father's not coming home. The saddest words, and I'll translate them because they weren't in English, that I heard in the federal prison room was after family visiting was over, and a 4-year-old kid grabbed their father and said, "Come home, Daddy." And he said, "I can't." He says, "Come with us, Daddy. We miss you." He said, "I can't." That kid cannot grasp what's happened. So Aleph steps in and says, you know what? We got a sad kid. Maybe they need counseling. Maybe they need financial help. We have a spouse. The federal prisons are full of men who have spouses who are bewildered because they've lived a fairly decent life with a spouse who they thought was honest, and suddenly they're not there. And they're not going to be there for 5 or 6 years. And a spouse, maybe, they worked, maybe they had their own career. Now suddenly it's a one-person paycheck. And more often than not, it takes 2 paychecks to keep the family in their house. Aleph steps in with financial aid. Aleph gives educational courses. Aleph gives scholarships. So if you want to be a passionate, sensitive advocate, and you want to create an alternative to incarceration, you can't just show up in court and say, "Excuse me, Judge, by the way, this is a very good person. I think they would do well on home confinement." You need to have them evaluated. You need to have someone write a letter or a report who knows what they're talking about, who has the credentials to back it up. Have you read some of the sentencing advocacy work, the written work by Aleph on behalf of individuals? If you haven't, you should. Study it. Use it as a model. Don't crib it, because they're individual. The Supreme Court has said that you must sentence the offender, not the offense. You must impose a sentence that is sufficient, but not greater than necessary, to promote respect for the law. What does that mean? When the guidelines suggest a 20-year sentence, there are good judges who will think they're doing a great, deed, a good deed, a mitzvah, if they give you 15 years, because they could have given you 20 years. 15 years and 20 years to a middle-aged person it's better to have 15 than 20. But that person might be workable. That person might be viable to develop a sentencing alternative proposal. Are they articulate enough to speak at high schools? You want to deter people from committing crimes? let someone who has committed a crime, who's facing 15 years in prison, go into a high school before they're sentenced and say, don't do this. I've lost my family. I've lost my husband. I've lost my wife. I've lost my children. My parents are dying while I'm in jail, and I can't go to the funeral. That's a way to deter other people from going to prison. Aleph crafts those programs. Is there a vulnerable high school, college student program in your community or in a neighboring community? How do you reach out to them? Aleph knows how. Aleph knows how. I guess that's my signal to wrap this up, but let me just finish. Is it not the signal? Are we supposed to just ignore this fire alarm? I don't know what it is. All right. So I now am, I've got like a minute, right? Okay. So in a minute, I'm going to tell you my philosophy on sentencing. Okay? My philosophy on sentencing is get to know the person you're representing. Learn about them. Were they a good person? Did they help someone? Did they help someone in a way that was extraordinary? Is this judge someone who might be interested in that? And that's one of the failings of criminal lawyers throughout the country. They don't know anything about the judges, generally, who they appear before. Different judges have different sentencing philosophies. Different judges have certain arguments that appeal to them and others that they reject. Don't be a jerk. Don't go to court on sentencing unprepared. If you went to trial, you would be prepared. You're going to sentencing, they walk in, they have I've watched this, they have no idea what buttons not to press, and they press them. And suddenly the judge turns into someone you don't want them to turn into prior to sentencing. And it's easy today with technology. Find lawyers in your jurisdiction who've worked in that courtroom. Find out what it is that the judge believes to be appropriate for a sentencing memo, for an argument on behalf of an individual, and then find something that's honest and true. I'll tell you one story because it really makes a wonderful point. I represented a kid who was just a nice kid with no talent whatsoever. He was just a nice kid, but he had nothing going for him. And he got involved in a drug offense, and he could have gotten 5 or 6 years in jail. And I said to him, I want you to get me letters from people who know you, who can honestly say to the court why you are worth giving a break to. And he looked at me and he said, I don't know anybody. I said, you do. Go home and figure out who you know and ask them to write a letter that tells me that you are a good person. And he brought me a letter from his dentist. It's a true story. And the dentist said, Dear Mr. Brafman, I want you to know that Jimmy always comes on time to his appointments. That was it. That was it. I wrote a whole sentencing memo around the fact that Jimmy had nobody, and that in a federal prison he would be eaten alive, and that the court needs to see in Jimmy a compassionate, wounded person with some fundamental goodness. And the letter from the dentist resonated with the judge. And I said to the judge, I've never stood in the well of the courtroom without 40, 50, 60 letters. And sometimes the judges discount the letters. And sometimes the judges use the letters. This is a letter you should use. Now today, I would send him to Aleph. And I would ask Aleph to job train him, to give him a career, to get him a future, so that I could go to the judge and say, he's getting good training. Don't interrupt the training. Don't interrupt the therapy a person may be getting for drug treatment or for gambling addiction. Don't interrupt the therapy by warehousing him in a prison. And when you're dealing with someone who's not a danger to society, it's a good argument. Now, you may not always win these arguments, but if you don't make them, then there's something wrong with how you practice, and you should just do real estate closings. Thank you very much.
Ben, will you represent me if I get in trouble, please?
I'll try.
Please, I'm going to try not to get. My name is Joy Fishman. I'm on the board of Aleph. I'm not going to be as long. I don't have that much to say, but I want to tell you that I'm on the receiving end of all the work that Aleph does. When my son was born, white Jewish boy, he's going to be president, going to be one of you, a prosecutor, a judge, a lawyer. He was not born to grow up to be a substance abuser and a heroin addict. And sadly, he did die of a heroin overdose. Aleph came into my life before Jonathan died. He was not a great thief, my son. So every time he was arrested for stealing something, he would be sent to jail. I, as a timid, scared Jewish mother, was always afraid to go visit him in jail. So who went? Rabbi Katz, who runs the prison program at Aleph. So thank God it saved me that pain, because as a mother, thinking of your son being locked in a jail cell, it's the pain of it, the picture of it is so grueling, and it was not in me to be able to go and give succor to my boy. Aleph did it for me. Aleph gave me 4 years of my son being drug-free. Now here's the irony of my life. Rabbi Lipskar mentioned that my husband, Jack Fishman, invented Narcan, naloxone, which most of you know, I hope you know, has saved hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lives throughout the world. Thank you. Of course, the irony is it was not around when my son overdosed. Anyway, I am totally committed to Aleph. I'm totally committed to every parent like myself who has been facing the idea of their kid going to prison. I found my niche in picturing not only the parents, but in picturing the little kids that Ben was describing that have to deal with cruelty of other kids when they know that someone's parent is incarcerated. So we have the family program, and we do send, and we're hoping this year we will be able to send 100 children of incarcerated people to summer camp. It works many ways. It's a blessing for the parents at home, and it is a place for a child to go and feel that they belong, that they can be comfortable, that they're not going to be bullied. The other thing that we do, I don't know if this was mentioned, but there isn't a holiday that goes by that Aleph doesn't take care of our Jewish people. We send out thousands and thousands of gifts, Hanukkah, not only to the people who are incarcerated, but we send Hanukkah gifts to all the kids of people who are incarcerated. We just finished sending, a few months ago, all of our Passover to everyone in prison and to people who are in the armed forces as well, because they're also out of their own comfort zone. But we send matzah, we send grape juice, we send gefilte fish, we send thousands and thousands of packages. Our job at Aleph is to make incarcerated people feel that they have somebody out in the world who is there for them, who will give them the permission in prison to practice their religion, to have Friday night services, Saturday morning services. We are an organization of kindness, redemption, and great power to the people who receive us. So thank you all for coming, and we're going to show you a video now. Is that ready to go? Where is the IT guy? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joy.